Hello, folks. Thank you for listening to the Jeff and Axe Horror Show. My name is Jeff. Over there's my partner, Axe. How you doing, Axe?
Doing real good.
All right, well, Axe, Easter 2019 is in the books. How was your Easter, Axe?
Yummy.
Did you say yummy?
Yeah, ate lots of good food, lots of pie.
Oh, okay. I like pie myself. What kind of pie you like, Axe?
Oh, lots of them. I ate apple and custard.
Okay. I'm a lemon meringue guy.
I like lemon meringue. Don't too much care for key lime.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So anyways, Axe, I'm glad you had a good Easter. It probably was a little better than mine. I spent Easter night in the hospital. First of all, I wanted to apologize to everybody if my voice is a little off tonight. I was diagnosed with an upper respiratory infection on Easter night, and, I kind of felt a chest tightness that day and kind of had to go to the emergency room. But I'm on the mend, and I'm doing a lot better. And, the show must go on. Another thing we got to talk about, Axe, this event is going to be over with, actually, after this episode comes out. But we are going to be doing a little recap on a future episode of the Motor City Nightmares Horror Festival, which is April 26th through the 28th in Novi, Michigan. And you and I are going to be down there kind of co-mingling with the celebrities. We're going to do kind of a recap show of that on our next episode. But our theme this week, around these parts, it is prom season. Did you go to prom, Axe?
I went to 3 of them.
You went to 3 of them. Okay, so you did more than I did.
Unfortunately.
I went to none. Absolutely none. So our theme this week, if you haven't already figured it out, is going to be the prom night movies, the first 2. Let's not talk about the other ones in the franchise. But before we get into that, Axe, I thought we'd switch things up a little bit this week. How about you go first and tell me what you watched this week?
It was kind of funny. We were sitting around the table at the lunchroom at my work, and I was talking to this girl, and she's like, "Yeah, I really like this movie when I was a kid, Ghost Ship." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I've seen it, She's like, "Yeah, that was so scary. It scared my sister." And yeah, I was the creepy little kid. I was looking at her, and I thought that was kind of funny because I'm not sure if she knew who she was talking to. I'm like, "Yeah, so did you ever see that movie, The Omen?" Yeah. I'm like, "You know the kid in that?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Well, that was me." So, it made me want to go and recap on The Omen a little bit. It's definitely one of my favorite series. It's absolutely one of the greatest soundtracks ever written for a horror movie. Jerry Goldsmith did amazing scoring to The Omen. And I say that about the original.
Yes, absolutely.
1976. I prefer the original to the remake. Although I will say that it was one of the few remakes that held up. Of course, there's so many memorable scenes. The part that I like the most about the original, though, is the dogs in the cemetery.
Yeah.
That movie just always gets my heart racing. And the way it's shot, it's got so much intensity and moodiness. The dark clouds, and it's just one of the greatest cinematic horror pieces ever made. And I really love The Omen. And, they made a few other ones. The story continued. The Antichrist grows up, goes to military school, tries to cure world hunger. Then I think in part 3, he's reincarnated in a little girl. They'd run out of ideas by then.
Yeah, yep. And then part 4 was The Awakening, I believe. And that was the one that was centered completely around the little girl.
That's the one I'm remembering. So the original Antichrist character had 3 movies.
Right.
The 4th one was the little girl.
Yeah, I had just saw The Awakening for the first time not too long ago, and it was different. It didn't seem like it was part of the series at all. It kind of felt like the Halloween 3 of the Omen series.
Yeah, but I will say this. I happen to like the scene in the remake a little better where the lightning rod goes through the priest, in the storm.
Right.
I kind of thought the more modern special effects enhanced that particular scene a little bit, and I like that in the remake. But for some reason, the dogs in the cemetery in the old one That whole sequence is just, I can watch it, and it's just so, it just never gets old. I don't know. It's one of those few movies that, around Halloween time, it's like, it's gotten to be for, most horror movie fans, that special time of year comes around and these movies start being played and you're like, damn, I've seen this movie 100 times, like it stops losing its excitement. But The Omen is one of those movies for me that when that time comes around, I still continue to watch when it's on. Definitely dig it.
Yeah, absolutely. When it's on the AMC Fright Fest or what they run there through October, I mean, you can't help but watch it. So, any other stuff you watched?
I was checking out Christine again. This John Carpenter's music. I'm a big fan of his music scores and the fact that he not only writes and directs his movies, but scores them. He's the only guy that can pretty much say that out there. There's a few, smaller filmmakers out there that have probably done it, but the success that he's had, it's all been his vision 100% from start to finish. Like, it's not a collaboration. It's John Carpenter, and that's it, I love that about him. And I really liked the soundtrack to Christine. Christine was actually the first Stephen King book that I had read. It holds a special place for me. With Stephen King, I'm one of those fans that other fans don't like because I quite often enjoy the movies more than the books. In the sense of Christine, I kind of like the movie more than I like the book. The book had some great moments that are missing from the movie, which is sad. But John Carpenter did such a good job, especially with Arnie Cunningham's character. He just really captured that whole nerdy, made you feel for that character in that movie and does it in a short amount of time. That's the thing about reading a book to a movie, like in a book, you have a whole lot more time to adapt to the character, to grow feelings and emotions towards the character. In a movie, you have to do it much quicker. You have to sell the character faster. Can't say enough good things about John Carpenter, and Christine's definitely up there in one of his top best movies that he ever made. And
absolutely.
it's crazy how many cars that they went through to make that movie. And the 58 Plymouth Fury is not that easy to come by. Just try finding the model at a Hobby Lobby or something. It's like you can't. It's very rare that you'll find a 58 Plymouth Fury. And I think that's why Stephen King chose that car, was because it was a flop. It's almost like the car's getting revenge because nobody wanted it.
I agree with you, X. It's I think Christine is certainly one of John Carpenter's best films. Me personally, I put it up there with Halloween. I put it up there with Body Bags. I think Body Bags is John Carpenter's most underrated film.
Possibly.
It's another one of those movies. Your picks this week, Axe, were pretty good because they're two movies that you can just go and watch as a diehard horror fan anytime they're on, or just, pop in the DVD player or whatever.
There's the scene where Buddy Repperton's being chased down the road and he's running in his cowboy boots. And the car is just on fire, creeping up to him closer and closer. And he's running, but he can't outrun this car. It's a very iconic scene. But I also think that it was borrowed. One of my favorite bands, Radiohead. If you've ever seen the music video to Karma Police, I really feel like they based that music video off of that scene, where the car is just inching in and it's on fire. It definitely reeks of Christine. It's definitely pop culture.
Now that you say that about the video, I have seen the video. I'm not a massive Radiohead fan, but I definitely know their music, and yeah, I can definitely see the resemblance there. Well, with all the crap going on Sunday, it was kind of a busy week for me, but I was still able to sit down and watch some stuff. Since it was just Easter, I decided to watch a Easter-themed horror movie, and there's a few of these. The one I watched is called Easter Bunny Kill Kill. It's from 2006, and it kind of tells the story of this mom with her mentally handicapped son, and she's dating this guy that's kind of a piece of shit. He just commits a bad robbery at the beginning of the movie, and he's just a real turd. He's wearing a a Easter bunny mask when he commits this robbery, and this kid kind of believes that he's the Easter bunny at first, and then this kid finds an Easter bunny or a bunny, and he calls it the Easter. It's just a really strange film. This is extremely low budget. It looks like it was kind of shot in somebody's, front yard, but it's a different type of movie. Nothing I would, write home about. Let's see, moving on here. I watched a movie X from 1983. It's a movie called Conquest. This is a movie that, believe it or not, is directed by Lucio Fulci. This is kind of like a barbarian type of movie that it's not necessarily a horror movie. It's kind of more of a medieval type fantasy movie, but this is one of the earlier Fulci films, and I think this is definitely one of his lesser known films. It's a pretty good film. It's strange, and so if you get a chance, check this one out. It's called Conquest, and it's kind of about these two guys that are kind of looking for this sword, I believe it is, and they have to go kill this witch to get it. And
there's a lot of those, when Conan came out, you got a lot of low budget movies, sometimes they'd mix it with sci-fi.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, it was pretty interesting. It was kind of surprising that when I looked at the director that Fulci directed it. It's a decent film. It's definitely low budget, but most of his movies were fairly low budget. Let's see here. So we're going way back with this one, Hex. From 1959, I watched Beast from Haunted Cave. This is a movie that kind of takes place in the Black Hills of South Dakota. It tells the story of these bank robbers that are trying to, steal gold, and they get caught up in this snowstorm in this town, and there's this giant, spider-like creature that is dwelling in the town, and kind of traps them in this snowstorm. And it's just obviously this is a black and white film, and it's, from 1959, so it's pretty dated, but it's one of those films that, for these type of movies, Zach, I feel that the shorter the runtime, the better. And I think it's easier to get through. With the black and white film, sometimes I kind of struggle with that.
Yeah, I mean, we're so spoiled, with all the modern, everything is super high def, and it's very disconnected from the whole old school globe TVs, and, trying to get your antennas to work and looking through fuzz and, the way it used to be.
But it was nice to sit down and watch, a really old film that I don't think it's not one of those films by any means that stood the test of time. It's a no-budget film from the late 50s, It
was already Tarantula in 1955, so it wasn't even the first giant spider movie.
Yeah, exactly. This is a ripoff of, and not just Tarantula, but a lot of other, creature feature movies that were coming out in that era. This kind of, everybody was kind of ripping off everybody, Monty Hellman was the director of it. I'm trying to think. I don't think there's anybody real notable in it, but it's like I said, it's a decent movie, and it's a shorter film. It's only about 65 minutes long, so just over an hour. So it's extremely easy to get through. If you're really bored, I would recommend it. But if not, then for those of our listeners that are not old school fans, and I'm talking real old school, like black and white stuff, I would definitely avoid it, obviously. But so moving on here, I actually got a couple more from 2011. I just watched this today, actually, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. 2011, I watched the film Donner Pass. The name of this film kind of caught my eye because I was instantly thinking the Donner Party.
Right.
We could go in depth about the Donner Party, but I'm sure, our avid listeners know a little bit about them. But that's kind of what I was...
Chew on that later.
Yeah, exactly. But that's kind of what I was thinking here. That was my... when you see that last name, that's kind of what you think. You either think of that or you think of the fucking reindeer. That's kind of what I thought, but it absolutely was not that. They kind of hinted at it for a brief second, but this is essentially a movie that it's just kind of another simple slasher, not much different than the rest. And these people are kind of, teens or college students, whatever the hell they are, kind of lured out into the woods, and these cannibals are there, and it's just a story that's happened over and over and over again. And I was expecting something different, with this title, and I know, Axe, they say not to judge a book by its cover, and I think that goes for movie titles too, but there are some exceptions to that rule.
The VHS days were the exceptions to that rule, because when I was a kid and I couldn't read, I could go into the movie store and I could look at the cover and tell which one was going to scare me. That was the priceless thing about that era. You can never get back.
I definitely agree. As you know, I still have a lot of my VHSs, and that's what it was. It was the covers that brought people in. Just getting back to this movie a little bit, it was just kind of a letdown. I just wasn't real big on it, but, watched it nonetheless. And so this week I kind of saved the best for last. Axe, out of all the films I did watch this week, this was definitely my personal favorite, other than our feature films of this week, of course. I watched a movie from 2018, Axe. It's called Skeletons in the Closet. This is an anthology film. This is a total 80s throwback to the VHS era that we were just talking about. This is a really fun film. Ellie Church is in this film as the widow in one of the segments of the anthology, and she is just fucking phenomenal. Plays it to a T. She's just this really decrepit old granny, and just, the grandmother that you would never want to end up with. You always want to go to grandma's house and she's got cookies made for you, and this bitch, is just like, you are going to be the cookies, you know what I'm saying? Just really, really cool stuff. So, Axe, if you get a chance, out of all these films, if you get a chance to check this one out, this is the one that I highly recommend.
Skeletons in the Closet, huh?
Skeletons in the Closet. Yep, I'm going to have to write that down, man. This is a really, really cool movie. All the segments are great. It kind of centers, I won't ruin it for you, or our listeners for that matter, because this is a fairly new movie. So, when it comes to spoiling around our show, we try not to spoil anything, but the thing is, Axe, is, if a movie's been out for a long time, we're going to fucking spoil it, because everybody should have seen it by now. But a movie that only came out in 2018, not everybody's seen that yet. So you got to give people a little bit of time to go out and see that and check it out before you start really spoiling stuff. But I will say this about it. It kind of, obviously, when it comes to anthologies, there's always a little, segment that leads into the stories and stuff. And it kind of centers around this girl that is being watched by this teenage babysitter. And this girl is obsessed with this horror show, late night horror host show called Skeletons in the Closet. And what the Skeletons in the Closet premise is that this lady killed her husband, and now she and her dead husband host Skeletons in the Closet. It's just a really cool throwback, Axe. I think you'll love it if you get a chance to check it out.
Beyond that, for sure.
So yeah, that's pretty much what I watched this week. I did say, and I apologize to our listeners, I did say that I was gonna try to finish the Critters series on Shudder, and I did start a couple more episodes, but I haven't been able to finish it yet because I've been watching other things, and it's, as you know, Axe, it's real tough to balance a lot of stuff, and we also had to get to our feature films too, and so I think it's time to do that, Axe. As we kind of talked about earlier, our feature films this week are the Prom Night films. And the first one is from 1980. It's the original Prom Night. The story kind of starts with these kids, and they're kind of at this school. They're kind of playing around the school and horsing around and, doing all that stupid shit that kids our age wouldn't imagine doing, but like older people would say, we used to do those stupid games all the time, and they're kind of chastising this girl about, you're the killer's going to get you and all this, and the killer's going to get you, and they're just horsing around the school. And then what ends up happening is the girl that they're chastising there through the school ends up accidentally falling out this couple story window to her death. And that's kind of how the movie starts, Axe. And you kind of fast forward, and they're in their high school years now, and they're getting these phone calls, from this mysterious caller that, they have no idea who the hell is. Kind of real creepy phone calls and everything. And then, from there, shit kind of starts hitting the fan. And, that's kind of when the killing starts. But it takes a while for this movie to get going. Prom Night, the original. What you think of it, Axe?
Oh, I think a lot of this movie. I'm going to say the first time I saw Prom Night, I was around 10. I was trying to go through the old school slasher movies and made sure I saw them all, or at least as many as I had access to back then. Prom Night, the very beginning, these kids are creepy as fuck. The director did a great job getting these kids to be that intense. I mean, I kind of feel like it's one of the best scenes in the movie because these kids just, pointing their finger and stepping closer to the camera, and the killer's gonna get you. The whole thing, I mean, yeah, it's a lot like Halloween with the kids antagonizing. We'd seen that before. But in this particular scene, they really push that anxiety. You feel like jumping out that window with that girl because it's so intense. I like that about it. So all of the dancing in this movie, oh Lord. Man, some people got some good moves. I cannot sit and watch this movie and not wiggle my ass a little. I mean, the disco in this movie, is just so great, and it's like you got, fun dancing and getting down and killing at the same time. And it's a happy place for me. And, the scene getting the head chopped off and rolling down the stage, that it's just so cinematic. It holds up. None of the characters are bad in this movie. All of the acting is really good. Jamie Lee Curtis does a fantastic job as an actress. She's not Laurie Strode in this movie. She's an entirely different character. It's cool to see that she did get typecast, and that sucks, but this movie stands on its own. The dude with the van. Oh, man, the van is so fucking cool. I wish I had that van, huh?
Oh, absolutely.
How cool. He just fucking pulls up to the chick and like, hey, baby. And they're like, just completely hit it off. And then, I mean, there's some funny shit. Like, they're fucking in the van and he gets done. And he's like, oh, that was the best ever. She's like, yeah, it was my first time too. And she just hops right out of the van. Like no big deal. Kind of seems funny to me, and then he's got the history book and he opens it up and it's full of joints.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Oh yeah. That's funny you brought that up, Axe, because I was just going to say that, now correct me if I'm wrong, but that character with the van is Seymour, right?
Yeah.
I have it written down in my notes here that, because I couldn't, it's been a while since I've watched it, and of course I've watched Prom Night numerous times over the years, but I had it written down in my notes that Seymour was my personal favorite character of this whole film.
And he's hanging outside, the van, that whole scene where he jumps inside the van with him and they're driving around like crazy. It's just so exciting. It's got so much momentum. This movie really, to me, it's not just waiting for the next kill scene. It actually had good stuff in between, but the actual kill scenes are really, really great. I mean, this guy with the fucking axe is just so iconic. The whole chase scene through the school, it's just one of the greatest slasher movies ever made.
It's a great film. It's really interesting here, Axe, because I forgot to kind of tell people this, that our theme this week, Axe, was kind of supposed to be women in horror, but we kind of just went with the Prom Night theme, and it was your idea, you kind of suggested it to me, And I'm glad you did because, I gotta say this. I think that Prom Night and Prom Night 2, Hello Mary Lou, which we're going to get to here in a second, are both fantastic in their own way. I think that Hello Mary Lou is a really good sequel, but Prom Night, the original, it's so raw and it's just in your face, and I love it. I think I completely agree with you. I think Jamie Lee Curtis is just phenomenal in this movie, and as far as the dancing goes, I couldn't fucking dance if my life depended on it, but I certainly wanted to after watching this. Just a great film and simple. And this film was, fairly low budget. This film was made for just like $2 million American, I think it was. And because a lot of people don't realize this, but this movie was actually filmed in Toronto, Canada. And I read something online that this was made for about 1.5 million Canadian dollars. So probably about $1 million American then. I take that back, X.
That's pretty cheap.
Exactly. That's a really cheap movie that turned out to be a horror treasure, a classic. One thing I will say before we move on here, Ax, and before we get to our ratings, is I know you and I have our differences on stuff and we have our, similarities on stuff. But one thing I will say is it's been a while since I've watched it, but I do remember liking the Prom Night remake. It's one of the few that, I think they did a good job with what they had. But that being said, I won't even go into depth about that. It will never even come close to the original.
I'd never caught that remake. I'd never watched the remake of Prom Night. Never really wanted to,
See, I can understand that also. But I guess I will say this. I don't think I'm as big a fan of this movie as you are, Ax, but I do absolutely enjoy it. So I'll kick it off and I'll let you take the floor last here on this one. But I'm going to say that I'm going to give this 3.5 blood drops.
I'm going for 4. I'll give it 4 because this is definitely one of those movies I enjoy watching. I'll give it a 4.
Okay. To me, it seems like there's a couple of kind of loose ends. Obviously it all ties together at the end, and everybody knows how this ends. Everybody doesn't really know who it is, This is one of the movies that really kind of, because there's those movies where you absolutely know who the killer is in a slasher, but this one is it does a good job of kind of hiding it.
Look at that whole end sequence where she's over him crying, telling the police, don't shoot him. Even after getting chased all through that damn school and the axe and all of that shit, she still cares for her childhood friend. I actually was very moved watching it. I feel like sometimes people are just fucked up in the head and, they might have started out as good people and they just got fucked up. And that happens and it's sad. And this movie had that in there, it's good. Things are never all just black and white,
Yeah, absolutely. Let's be honest, Ax. There's going to be films that you and I review each week and we talk about and we bullshit each week about that are going to have sentimental value to us. And I think Prom Night is certainly one of those films for you.
Absolutely. Yep. I still can remember as a kid the first time watching it. It's definitely a good memory. So that has a lot to do with sometimes with art, any kind of art, music, movies, what have you. Depending on what mood you're in when you go to sit down. Are you distracted? Are you pissed off? Are you thinking about a girl? Sometimes a movie seems like it's shit the first time you watch it. And then you go back and you're like, oh, I missed all of this stuff. Sometimes I get real excited for a movie and I go out and I watch it. And the excitement made me like the movie at first. And then you go back and you rewatch it and you're like, oh, this movie actually kind of sucked, didn't it? I was all excited. And so, you get both. There's two sides to every coin there.
Yeah. When it comes to movies in general, you have to have a certain expectation that the movie's not always going to exceed your expectations. And if you can go in with that, this is kind of movie 101 here, Ax. We're going off a little bit here. talking about not just horror, but anything. Sometimes people's expectations are a little too high, and that kind of, sets yourself up for a letdown sometimes. But getting back to Prom Night, I don't think anybody in their right mind has ever said that the original Prom Night was a letdown. And if they were, I'm kind of wondering what kind of drugs they're on.
Right.
But, that being said, I gave it a 3.5. Axe gave it a 4. But moving on. So from 1987, our other movie is the sequel to Prom Night, of course. It's Prom Night 2, Hello, Mary Lou. First of all, if you have never seen either one of these movies, to answer your question right away, because everybody always asks this, can I watch the second one without watching the first one? Yes, technically you can, because this is not a direct sequel by any means, and there's not a lot of similarities in these two movies by any means, and they came out in different eras. That's the one thing that I noticed with watching these back-to-back acts was I noticed how you can really see the transition of horror films, because even though Prom Night came out in 1980, it was still a 70s film. You just get that 70s vibe from it. The sequel obviously is a straight 80s film. This was like in the heart of the 80s.
It fucking screams 80s. The clothes, the hair, everything is just off the wall 80s.
Absolutely. The music, just everything in this fucking movie. Prom Night 2, Hello, Mary Lou kind of starts off. There's this show going on, and this guy is like a talent show. Is that what's going on?
It opens up with the suitcase opens up, and it's telling you the story of Mary Lou back in the 50s.
Right, exactly. Back in the 50s, the suitcase opens up, and there's kind of this talent show that's going on. And there's this guy that he's just acting really strange, and he goes up into the rafters of the auditorium. And, there's this crazy accident that ends up happening, and she ends up getting burned alive, X. Kind of fast forward 30 years, because from 1957, obviously this was made in 87. So this girl in this high school, which happens to be the same high school as the original Prom Night.
They kept that the same.
Yep, one of the similarities, one of the very few similarities. She's in this high school, and Vicky's her name. She kind of gets possessed by the spirit of Mary Lou. That's kind of where this movie kind of takes a crazy turn. First of all, I think this movie was really casted well. I think Michael Ironside as the principal, he was really one of the mains in this. I thought he was fantastic.
Doc Simpson was in the first and this one, and also the fourth.
Yep. The similarities are there because this is definitely another revenge type of slasher, but it's a different style. The fact that she is overtaking this helpless high school girl, and she just can't snap out of it. It's a pretty entertaining film, Max. We know your thoughts on the first Prom Night, so what are your thoughts on Prom Night 2, Hello, Mary Lou?
Oh, I have many. So, first of all, the tits. The tits in this movie are great. This whole era of movie, I would say Night of the Demons is very similar. So you have the whole Catholic part in this movie where she's going to confession and forgive me, Father, for I have sinned, and it's very satanic, sacrilegious. It's making fun of religion. These movies are really good at doing that. And pairing this holy, iconic images, the cross and the priest, and then just, film the titties, go straight to the titties, get people feeling a certain way, and then completely turn it and twist it and piss people off. Because, me for one, I feel like that's part of a horror movie, is if you're not pissing people off, you're not fucking doing anything. Because if your mom isn't scared of letting you watch it as a kid, it probably sucks. This is one of those movies your mom probably didn't want you to watch as a kid because it's, good stuff in it. It's a good one. And I was exposed to it at an early age. So I had this weird aunt, right? And she, for whatever reason, had a thing for ghosts that want to rape you.
Oh.
Like she had The Entity. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Entity. But that was one of her favorites. And this was another one that my aunt had in her collection, that sometimes I'd go over and spend the night and watch her movies. This was one of those. You know, it's a ghost story. Maybe the only similarity for Prom Night is that it's got prom in it.
Right.
You know, there's prom. But that's about it, you know? And the hair and the makeup and all of the 80s. The 80s is so drastic in this movie. It's one of maybe the most extreme 80s stylistic movies I've maybe ever seen. It's just one of those movies where it's got supernatural. It's got with the locker, you know, and she's a wop babaloo bop, a wop bam boom. You know, and the locker smashes and the fucking blood comes out, you know. It just makes me smile. It's just, you know, good campy, you know, and then there's titties. That always makes me like a movie, even if it sucks. Maybe some people will think this movie sucks, but I don't.
I agree with you. I don't think it does either. You know, and absolutely the fucking titties in this film, man. You can't stress that enough if you're a horny male. I mean, and even our female listeners have to respect that, you know, that is pretty impressive. But that being said, you know, this is a pretty good sequel, Axe. This is, you know, a pretty good non-related sequel. I agree with you. I think the 80s are really strong in this movie. I'm going to say I am going to give this a solid 3 blood drops, Axe.
I totally agree. It's definitely a 3.
I think this is another film that has kind of stood the test of time. Maybe not as much as the original Prom Night, definitely. But this is one of the better sequels. This is absolutely the best sequel in the series by far.
Don't even bother with the others.
Right. So yeah, that's Prom Night. So, you know, all you kiddies that are headed out to your high school proms, you be watching out for Mary Lou. She might be coming for you. Well, that kind of wraps it up, Axe. Another week in the books. Thank you for listening to the Jeff and Axe Horror Show. My name is Jeff.
This is Axe.
And it's been a pleasure. We'll see you next time.